Right, now I know I've probably been through these slides with you before. It was on time. I'm not going to make any apologies whatsoever for this. It's important that we keep going over how we revise, when to revise, and the so that we can be more effective in our revision and not wasting our time. So this is really so that you do not waste your time when you are revising in a bad way. Because if you spend an hour revising but it's only effective for 5 minutes of it, what a waste of time. And with everything that's going to come on with next year in terms of exams and stuff like that, it's really important that we spend our time as wisely as we possibly can. So I need you to trust the process that we are going to go through when it comes to revision. It does work. Okay, this is based on scientific evidence, it's based on years of experience, and so just trust the process. Okay, this is not about where you are now, it's about saying, okay, this is where we want you to be in next year, this time next year, and it's going through the process of getting you to where we want you to be for next year. So the first thing really is going to be spaced learning. Okay, so you know, this is, I always find this stuff really interesting. Let's say you remembered 100% of the information in the lesson, but bang, within 20 minutes of the lesson finishing, you're down to about, you only remember 60%. After 30 days or 31 days, it's under 25% that you remember. So when you think about remembering stuff that you're learning now, June, and then thinking you've got to regurgitate this stuff in a mock exam in January, and then for the final exams next year, okay, if you only remember under 25%, we're in a problem. So what can we do about that? Now, this is the way the brain works. It's the same for everybody, so don't worry about it, but it's the same for everybody. So this is a little complicated, but essentially all it's saying is that here you start off. The first time you learn the information is here, okay, and you start to go all the way down here, and you just remember just on 25%, and then what you do, first repetition, you bring yourself back up to 100%. Now, as you can see, the rate of forgetfulness is less, and after 31 days you actually remember about 45%. Second repetition, you see there's a bigger gap between the first repetition and the second. This might be like 4 or 5 days, this could be 3 or 4 weeks. And then this could be a couple of months, and this could be 4 or 5 months, and so on. But each time you come back and you revise it back up to 100%, you forget less and less and less, and then forget less and less and less. Okay, so this is the way the brain works. So we need to work with this. Okay, so when you learn something, when you do a lesson and you learn something and you understand it, leave it for 3 or 4 days, come back to it, remind yourself of it, then leave it for 3 or 4 weeks, then come back to it, okay, remind yourself, and then leave it for a couple of months. Okay, and then that way, as you go through the process, you will become more and more confident, and you will forget less. Okay, so, and there's just another way of looking at it. Okay, so now common myths about multitasking and reading. The myth of reading and doing more than one thing at the same time, regardless of your gender. Okay, so we need to now, I think in the past what I've asked you to do is in pairs, you time yourself counting 1 to 26, and then counting, and then basically doing the alphabet. And as you can see here, this information is from psychological experiments, and they found there's about 12 seconds, 1 to 26, and A to Z under 10 seconds. But then if you try to do A1, B2, C3 combined, wow, it racks up to 55 seconds. So quite clearly, what is going on with this situation is that our brains are not very good really at multitasking. We don't multitask. What the brain is actually doing here in the combined bit is flipping between the part of the brain that does numbers and the part of the brain that does letters, and it's going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. But that takes time, it takes lots of mental energy, and you are unable to, and basically you can see it'd be a lot quicker just to do the numbers separately and the letters separately, and you will be done within 20 seconds or so rather than 55. So psychology has shown that really we cannot multitask. So if you've got the TV on in the background, then you're either watching TV or you're revising. You're not doing both. So if you listen to music and you actually listen to the music, you are not revising. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have music on in the background. It just means you need to be very careful of which type of music you choose. So I like to have music on in the background, but I choose music which I know very well. And it's in the background so much that there are times when the album is finished and I am not aware that the album is finished because it's just there in the background. But if I'm listening to music, I'm not revising. If I'm revising, I'm not actually listening to the music. So we do not multitask. So none of this having the TV on in the background. So what we have here is, just go back a bit, predicted learning versus actual performance. So repeated reading, here at the bottom, reading and retrieval practice. So those students who just, all they did was read, okay, the information, nothing else, no flashcards or anything like mind maps, just read, they predicted that they would do quite well in the exam. Those students who read and did lots of retrieval practice predicted they would not do as well, okay? But when it came to the actual performance, those students who just read like the textbook and did no retrieval practice did far worse than those students who read and did retrieval practice. Why is that as the case? It's because when you do retrieval practice, you're always coming across stuff that you have forgotten, and it's harder. It's just harder work. If you've got someone there testing you on keywords with the flashcard, then you will forget stuff, and it's hard. Reading a book is very passive. You read the book, yeah, I get this, I understand this as you read the book, but you're not actually retrieving any of the information. Retrieving the information is harder work, it's more tiring, you make more mistakes, and so therefore you think you are going to do badly in the exam. But because you have been using retrieval practice techniques, when it comes to the actual exam, you do far better because you have been training your brain to retrieve that information, where the person who has been reading the book haven't. So yes, some information has gone in, but nowhere near as much as those students who have been doing retrieval practice. So reading a textbook is a big no-no. If that's all you're doing, then you are simply wasting your time. And we don't have that time to waste. So what do we actually do? What are these retrieval techniques that we're going to look at? Dual coding. Okay, this is where you use, like words and simple symbols or pictures to help you remember. Now, I couldn't find a Black Panther cartoon, so I've got a panda, but actually it helps me remember. So okay, so remember about the Black Panthers in America who were looking at more violent, wanted to set up more like a black state in America, who were taking things a little bit further than Martin Luther King. So I'm able to remember all that information simply by taking like the title Black Panthers and putting together a symbol picture, and I'm able to remember stuff. Right, interleaving. So what I've got here is recognizing that actually there are lots of connections between a lot of the topics that we've been looking at. So what I've got here in the middle, I've got sanctity of life, the idea that life is special, because it's God-given, God has plans for you, you're made in the image of God, all that kind of stuff. And so therefore we should be looking after life, okay? But then we interleave into that into all these other different topics that we look at. So how does that all then apply to things like the death penalty, euthanasia, nuclear war, pacifism, contraception? So instead of learning these 9 topics independently and then reminding ourselves, well, what do Christians say about abortion? What do Christians say about euthanasia? Flip it the other way around and go, okay, this is what Christians think about sanctity of life is. And then you can start applying that to all these other different topics. And then it is easier for you to remember because you're remembering one thing, sanctity of life. And once you've got that, you are then able to apply to whatever topic comes your way. What most of us do is that we take the death penalty, so for example, and we revise everything about the death penalty and what Christians believe about that. And then we take euthanasia, learn everything about that and what Christians believe about euthanasia. But they're both using the same concept, sanctity of life. But because we are revising euthanasia and the death penalty separately, it's causing us more work. We're not seeing the connections. And if you can begin to see the connections of what Christians believe and how they apply to these seemingly very different topics, it becomes easier for you to remember. Okay? So the other one is elaboration. The wait, but why? What are the relationships between the different concepts? So, for example, you've got you could learn about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the Black Panthers separately, but they are related to each other. Malcolm X was a response to what Martin Luther King was doing. The Black Panthers was a response to what Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were doing. And if you could say, oh no, but why were the Black Panthers doing that? You could, well, Malcolm X was doing. Well, why did Malcolm X do that? Well, it's because Martin Luther King was doing this. And if you could see the connections again, then it's easier for you to remember. Okay. So if we go back here, if we take the idea of contraception here and the sanctity of life, like life is precious and God-given, blah, all that kind of stuff, and you say, oh, Catholics are against contraception. Absolutely right. Other Christians are for contraception. Absolutely right. Okay, now you've got a 50-50 chance there, you get it right. But if you actually say, but why are Catholics against contraception? Then you are able to tell the story. Well, they're against contraception because they believe that life is God-given and that the purpose of sex is to create children, and God decides we have children. Therefore, it makes sense about, and then that whole argument story applies to abortion as well. Okay, so you're starting to make lots of connections, and the elaboration enables you to continue to make those connections. So putting revision to practice while still revising. We talked about the linear system. In the system, correctly answered cards are advanced to the next, less frequent review box, while incorrectly answered cards return to the first box, more aggressive review and repetition. So now I've done this with my daughter where we did it with 3 boxes rather than 5. And like I said, this is one of the reasons why I wanted you to make these flashcards for the keywords and definitions, 1 keyword per flashcard. So what we did, you got a big chunk of flashcards, and most of you just keep them in 1 big chunk. But if you work with someone and they test you, if you get it right, then you basically say, here, you put it in box 5. You got it right, you're confident with it, put it in box 5. If you get it totally wrong, you put it in box 1. But quite a few of the cards, you're kind of thinking, I almost got it right, I think I got it right, but I'm not confident with it, put it in box 3. Now what you have done, you have identified parts of the course which you need to spend more time revising. So if you take 45 minutes, say revision, what you need to do is spend half an hour revising box 1, those cards which you were getting wrong. Okay, and you can do mind maps, whatever it is that you want to do, but you focus your half an hour on that, so it's really focused. You can then spend the next 10 minutes looking at box 3, those ones that were reasonably confident with but not totally confident, right? And then you can spend 5 minutes at the very end bolstering your self-esteem by looking at the ones that you were getting right all the time in box 5. Okay, and then once you've done that, leave it a few days, come back, have a friend test you again, all the cards, okay, starting with the box 1, and then actually see whether you can move some of the cards from box 1 which we were getting wrong up into the 3rd box, or maybe into the 5th box. So you are continually identifying, what you're doing is you're identifying where you need to focus your time and energy. You can physically see what you know and what you don't know. And actually most of the time you will be surprised at how much you do already know, and therefore you are effectively using your time. So what a lot of us do is, if we have that 45 minutes revision, we spend 5-10 minutes revising stuff we're struggling with, that's hard, and we focus on all the stuff that we know pretty well. Or what we do, we sit there thinking, I don't know what I don't know because I don't know it. Here you are identifying what you don't know, and then you are focusing your time and energy on revising what you don't know. Use the system, it works, it's brilliant. Practice questions. Again, you could do this in terms, again, in different ways. You can make up your own questions. You can, let's say you've got 25 minutes to do the set of questions in my subject. Well, one way you could do it is say, okay, take the 12 marker. Normally you'd have about 15 minutes for that. Don't worry about the time, just create the perfect answer. Look at the mark scheme, look at what the examiner is looking for, and just create the perfect example. And then, so you got your 10, 12 out of 12, okay, for that. And then you can work on your timings, okay? So again, practice questions, it's really good, and it turns to it in time as well, because that puts you under a little bit of pressure, and you are recalling that information, and then you can check. You could do an open book practice questions, you can do a closed book practice questions where you're doing it totally from recall. Okay, lots of different ways that you can use practice questions. So that is really good. Now, here are a whole different techniques. Blurting, we just blurt out a whole lot of stuff. Spider diagrams, note revision cards, recording notes and phone to listen to answer. Creating timelines, creating your own mock questions. Teach, talk it through it. Now, that's one of the things you can do when you're doing the flashcards. Okay, your revision cards. You know, when I was doing this with some students, I'll ask them about a particular question, a word, they'd give me the definition, and then I would ask another question. I might ask them to elaborate on it, but how does that fit in with this? Why did they do that? Look at YouTube. I've got lots of stuff on my YouTube channel now. I know that other subjects have as well. You can create posters, converting text into pictures, into symbols, is a good way of helping you to remember. Fantastic way. Notebook or condensed information. The Pomodoro technique, that's what I was talking about when you say you get 45 minutes and then you take 10 minutes rest, come back, do another 45 minutes. You need time to rest. Okay, you need time to give your brain to rest for you to come back and revise nice and refreshed. Post-it notes, condensed information, questions, past mock papers. So here's a whole load of stuff that you could be doing, different techniques, trying to record. There's one I haven't put on there, it's storytelling. You know, we are really good at remembering stories. So you tell a story. Now, some of these things will work better for other subjects than, you know, maybe storytelling. I don't know whether that's going to work particularly well with maths, but it would work incredibly well with history and with RE and maybe with geography and English and some other subjects as well. So some will work better with others, but we remember stories. I remember stories, but I haven't memorized word for word the story, but I know the story. So use stories to help you revise. So here's a whole load of different techniques you can use. Why we need to space out your learning, so you're not doing everything on one day. You've got to accept the fact that, yeah, you will revise, you remember 100%, but you will start to forget it. And then you need to come back 2-3 weeks later, revise again, and you start to forget it. But each time you do that, you forget less and less and less. Okay, let's make the most of our time.